Hello, my name is Sean Prober, and I'm here with Marley Morrow. Welcome to Abnormal Psych. Today we're going over the fact that everything we were taught turned out to be a lie.
Yeah, I have $100,000 in student loans, right? $100,000. And I'm looking at these facts, right? And every major study that we're taught in psychology, one by one, like, there's so many things that they don't teach you that make these studies, like, not reliable. And it just blows my mind that we have degrees and they were teaching us this.
Yeah, I guess we've gone over before kind of the nature of change in science and that sometimes things are wrong. But, geez, the amount of incorrect things when you really look at them, these twisted versions of these stories, it's
which is the basis of psychology as we like teach it in school.
We were talking last time about the issue with replication and this major issue in science that all of these studies that we've built educations out of have turned out to be false, or at least at this point we're incapable of replicating them. And kidding, we're deep in the studios. So as we go through this list, you'll see that exact issue.
I think that a lot of it has to do with when you're a researcher, your whole like reputation and your whole like career is based off of having these studies that have results that people find interesting or that you can talk about. So like when people have these studies, they want to find things, and even if they think that they're being fair, a lot of times they are doing things or overlooking factors that would influence the end results. So one of the major studies that I remember learning about is the Stanford prison experiment. When we're taught this story, it's about how like the dynamics of having somebody be like the prisoner and somebody be the guard, they kind of like change their personalities and they get into these like cult like roles. And this is taught even though it wouldn't be done now. And apparently there's evidence that its subjects knew what they wanted, what the researchers wanted, and played up their roles. So one participant straight up admitted to putting on a performance. So we're still teaching these studies to kids because they're interesting and it's what people want to learn when you're learning psychology. Like these are the things that you don't want boring
studies. It sounds sensational, for sure. They have this whole prison.
Exactly.
They have this whole thing, but it's true. They told the prisoners to be unruly. They told the guards to be a little authoritative.
Yeah.
So you really don't have much there other than a school play, an unscripted kind of school play that occurred.
They just want to prove that basically being a police officer, having this like superior role, like makes people change and makes people be violent or whatever. And I think more than anything, you see people maybe that have more of that authoritarian kind of personality that want to be police officers instead of it like changing you by being in this role. No, it's that certain kinds of people are more likely to be criminals and certain kind of people are more likely to be cops. And it is like based off of personality in some respects.
Certain types of people are more likely to get involved in an experiment.
Exactly. People at Stanford. Yeah. Like, not everybody can go to Stanford.
There was one boy who, do you remember, he seemed like he was very messed up for a long time. That he was dealing with a lot of issues for a while. I can imagine if you're on the other side and you were one of those officers that was acting, a bit harsh, that you would maybe play up that somebody told you to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than take responsibility for it. But who knows? I think that's a great example of an experiment that we'll never see anything like it
No.
I guess that's the promise of reality television to me. Like when you have Survivor, when you have The Mole, all those kind of weird shows, that was almost that next level. That was the continuation of this genre of research.
It's like confirmation bias. People want to believe that cops or people in authority are somehow turned evil by these positions. So like people in power, the power gets to them. Or is it that the person who has this personality flaw is the one willing to do anything to become this position? Another interesting experiment that they talk about is the bystander effect. So where when there's a lot of people around, people are less likely to help. And this is taught, like, oh, in the cities, that's why people are so mean because, there's so many people. They're like, oh, someone else will help you. And in the country, that's where everyone's so nice.
Nothing ever bad happens in the country.
Everybody will help you there. But it turns out that in this study where they pretend that somebody's being murdered and all these people supposedly witness it, only 6 people out of the 38 that they said saw the whole thing, only 6 of those people actually saw what was happening. So it's more of like maybe in a busy city, more people are distracted, so they're less likely to see what happened. So out of these 38 people, like most of them didn't even see what was happening. And
there's always screaming, there's always noises.
Exactly. And people scream all the time, and you can't just like run over to somebody because they're screaming.
There's even such a large population of homeless people in New York City, for instance. I lived in Queens and Brooklyn at different points, and it was not uncommon for somebody to be screaming their head off about this or that. Sometimes it was
they might be on drugs. Who knows?
It could be about anything, but I was almost relieved to have read this. I remember hearing something about this not being that true with Kitty Genevieve's, but I remember feeling kind of bad because I believe it was in Queens.
Yeah, you're like, oh, that's where the jerks are.
Yeah, it was not a great feeling, and you expect better of your neighborhood.
And I guess like 2 out of the 6 people who did see it called 911. And then there were others.
Yeah, that other people actually even called.
Yeah, exactly. And then there were other people who didn't call because they were afraid to call the police.
I mean, that's the sad truth, though, of just there are a lot of communities that won't call the police.
Yeah.
No matter what.
And you never know, like, what somebody's going through. And you assume, like, oh, this person just, like, doesn't care about what happened. Instead of maybe something bad happened and they're just totally distracted.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the idea that 2 people did call, I remember hearing about it and just thinking, they describe it that they're almost in a stadium.
Yeah.
And this poor woman is getting murdered right in the middle, and everybody was completely fine with it. So then something that you learn a lot about in neurology and any kind of
oh yeah, this is my favorite.
The brain angle, which is as you go through the list, it's just shocking how it's every single one of them. So Phineas Gage was a railroad worker, and he became famous because a piece of iron went into his eye one day, and from there doctors were supposedly able to figure out what kind of behaviors arise when certain parts of the brain are damaged. So that was kind of the
and his like personality there. Like supposedly completely changed. Like he was this super nice guy, then he gets this rod through his head and it takes out the nice part, and he's just this mean guy afterwards.
It's clean cut. It's weird to even say it back and think that something like that was taught to all of us at a certain point. As clear as day that this ridiculous idea that you can conclude anything based on the rod kind of going in. But then, he became a raging alcoholic. You could imagine that having no eye and a lot of stars.
He probably can't work after this. He has brain damage. He's disfigured. He was, his life had been completely ruined. So they're saying that it's not that his personality changed because this happened and, it affected his brain, but more of like this event changing his life in a negative way led him to being an alcoholic, which then led to him being a jerk, basically.
Yeah, I guess you hear a lot about there are a few stories like that. And, in a lot of ways, it's not that different than kind of the description of lobotomies. Typically, in kind of the rationale that it cuts off your thinking, or
yeah.
I'll pass on.
Have you ever heard the theory that if you force yourself to smile, that it makes you happier?
I have.
I've heard this
I've done it
recently.
Yeah.
I've heard this recently. And supposedly it only works 7% of the time. So they're telling everybody, just make yourself smile and you'll feel better. Well, maybe if you're like 7% of the people.
So is it 7% of the population maybe?
And this is after 50 years worth of data. Okay, so they did like a meta-analysis of all these studies. And they got 7% of the time it worked. So maybe these people would have just been happier in general.
It takes a more positive mindset to try to improve your state. True. I think if you're the type of person that would try to smile to become happier, you might be happier. It's tough. Yeah,
and how are they even measuring how happy they are?
Yeah, that's what I would like to know, really. What was really the content?
That's a big thing with psychology. It's like, how are you measuring it? Is it a self-evaluation?
Could very easily be right on a scale of 1 to 10 how happy you are. Smile. Now,
and power posing. That's pretty much goes into power posing, which is not real either, supposedly.
It's said that it does increase feelings of dominance, but not sometimes dominance wasn't helpful in a specific scenario. So it's kind of weird. I guess it depends on what you're doing. I guess it's called a power
pose. So if you want to feel empowered and dominant.
That's one of those things. I think there could be some truth to it. I mean, if you're feeling, it depends on what scenario you're going into. But it seems like if dominance was an important...
Dominance is always very important for most people.
Yeah, for sure. I think in business, it's all about that. You really see those moves of people spreading out. You put your wallet... If you ever see Trump, if he goes somewhere... He'll put his cup 3 or 4 feet ahead of him, put his notebook a few feet. He kind of...
Really?
Yeah, if he sits down at a desk in like a business meeting, he doesn't
even want that shit even close to him.
He's taking up a quarter. He's annexing table land with it. But you see a lot of it with CEOs of these kind of psychological games where they try to impact people's actual state with different kind of behaviors, different kind of presentations.
What about the Milgram Experiment? So that's the number one. So this is where some doctor or researcher was telling the participant to electrocute somebody who gets like an answer wrong. So every time they got something wrong, they have to give them like more and more of a charge. And they were supposedly trying to see like how far people would go.
Yeah, this was the explanation for Nazis, right? Like at the time, it was trying to see like how could a population, and I think there were even kind of racist overtones of it, of kind of like how could a white population, do something barbaric like this, and had to make this whole line of really inconsequential nonsense research about that. And here you have a lab. It kind of came out that a lot of these people realized that, like you said, that they weren't actually harming somebody.
Well, they knew it was a research study. So what's more likely that this is part of it and it's like a fake thing, or that they're really killing somebody in this research experiment.
Yeah, and then this gets generalized in a way that it's so important that we have to tell everybody about it forever, that this explains that when authority is, looking good in its lab coat and sounding official, humans resort back to their animal nature. They're just completely controllable. When in reality, it doesn't seem to always be the case, and this certainly wasn't the best evidence for it.
So I think this is a good lesson for people to think about in general. Is like, when people do things, do you really know the cause of it, or maybe something else is going on? We still like psychology, we're still very passionate about psychology, and
make some new studies.
Yeah, we just believe that people should have the knowledge that's out there and be able to make their own decisions and not be biased because they don't tell you this when they teach you these studies.
So speaking of kind of suspect research, did you hear about the Soviet Union was actually investing a ton of money into telepathy research?
I think it's real.
I guess people are studying wrong things.
I think things, and sometimes Natalie will say them so often, and I'm like, how? It's totally random too, and then she'll think it too.
They kind of link up. I know that Kelsey, my wife, is a twin, and she and her sister feel like they have this kind of mental connection, that they would know something happened, and they said that they both agree that it's gotten worse as the years have gone by. But for 4 to 5 years, they were basically the same person.
Wow.
And then gradually.
I guess it's the more you're apart.
Yeah. So, did you see what happened with Will Smith?
Yes.
So, for those who mustn't even be alive. For those who,
when I first saw it, I thought it was fake. I thought it was a staged thing.
Because he swaggered up there. The walk was the Fresh Prince. he had the arm tucked with the right arm.
And the guy saw him coming. Chris Rock saw him coming.
He leaned in and said, "What's up?"
And it wasn't even that big of a joke. She just said she didn't care. And I mean, it's not funny to joke about medical conditions, but saying G.I. Jane, Demi Moore was a sex symbol during that movie.
Yeah, she looked great.
So I don't really think that's a negative comment. That's a very G-rated comment.
Yeah, they're definitely a lot more insulting, and that's what the host does. They kind of jab.
I feel there's been way more inappropriate comments made that I've seen on all of the award shows.
Eminem and Christina Aguilera.
Yeah.
2000.
So many.
Yeah, for sure. But it kind of begs the question of why are so many people in society so happy for it? You saw his family. I think Jaden said, that's how we do it, and everybody kind of comes to the defense. But Chris Rock is nearly 60 years old. And he's a little dude,
Yeah.
To just slap somebody like that for saying
At least
anything.
he didn't punch him.
Yeah, the control.
In my mind, Will Smith has had a hard couple months. He's obviously going through something. So I've done things when I've had mental breakdowns that I wouldn't want people to judge my whole character based off of that. So I think we can't be too harsh. Not to say that it's not wrong to hit people, but the guy's just showing that he's human. He's going through something.
Yeah, for sure. And his
guys don't know how to express themselves. Instead of yelling at this guy or communicating, he goes to violence.
Instead of saying something to Jada.
Yeah.
Or expressing that anger, you kind of take it out. Because if you watch the video, he was laughing at the joke. And Jade looked disturbed by it.
Did she? Is that what happened?
But I think that Will actually, you can watch it, like Will actually laughed a little and then he stormed up there. I thought it was a punch when I first saw it, but yeah, it was just...
He's got big old hands, so I'm sure it hurt.
Will
I wouldn't want to be
Smith
smacked
just
by him.
slapped the shit out of me. Which is a great line.
I feel like Chris Rock took it classy,
You
though.
could see he was about to say something and he stopped. He's like... And then he kind of goes back and like says that line about the Oscars or like the greatest night. Like, yeah, he definitely held it together.
Because he probably understands that he's going through something too. Like, not that it's okay, but
yeah, I would need some Aladdin swag.
Yeah, for real.
I need something to make that right.
Aladdin.
So, did you hear that Trump asked Putin to release info on Hunter Biden's business deals?
So, I get that it's funny to be like a troll. Like, you know, I get it. And sometimes, even though I'm like disturbed, I do find Donald Trump funny.
Yeah.
But this is like, he's killing so many people. He's bombing women and children. Like, there's no like way that you can talk to this guy and like be friendly with this guy when he's doing this. This is like being friends with Hitler. Like, he's killing lots of people.
Yeah, to kind of, like you said, there's a value to trolling, and we could appreciate it. But when there's an active war going on where so many people are dying and the consequences are as high as possible with Russia having nuclear bombs. I know Biden got in a little trouble the other day for saying, like, Putin has to go. Because the idea that this man has to go is terrifying. It is hard to imagine, like, this getting back to normal.
And it doesn't mean that the U.S. is gonna, like, go to war with Russia, but we need to find a way to get Putin out of power. Like, that is a reality for the world.
Now, I'm sure that we don't have the numbers on it, but I'm sure there are a lot of Russians who are not very happy right now. And not just your average Joe who's now struggling because of all these tariffs, but the most important people in society who really could care less about Ukraine. If you think Roman Abramovich, when he's watching Chelsea Football Club, gives a damn about what happens in Ukraine, it's wrong. And I think a lot of the people that have power are probably pretty upset about this whole scenario and seem to have a much friendlier relationship with the West. These guys all do a lot of business in the West and seem to spend more time in the West than actually in Russia. So I would be shocked if they had the same fears that Putin seems to of NATO bases being surrounding and Ukraine being part of NATO. It would be hard to imagine that the people that have the most wealth in Russia with so much time spent in the West have that same kind of feeling. So it's very possible that Russia does something, the Russian people,
I hope they do,
and take it. That might be the best case scenario, because the idea of him being taken out in a Saddam Hussein kind of style, he might have the nuclear codes. You would hope that the people who worked under would say, no, I refuse to press the button, but
they haven't so far.
Yeah.
And look at all the soldiers like doing all this. I keep seeing stories about people getting raped and horrible things happening to the Ukrainian people by the Russian soldiers.
Yeah.
So it's not just Putin. It is Putin and all these people who are listening to him. Just like with the Nazis, all the people got, had their day in trial.
Yeah, think about from a propaganda standpoint how they have those crematoriums, those mobile crematoriums that you don't have that aesthetic of body bags coming back home. That everybody's just, oh, they're missing right now, or, we don't have great radio and communication with the outside. You'll hear from your loved one in a few months. There are probably thousands of people who are dead, who their family have no clue.
Yep.
And
I was seeing a story this morning about this guy saying his wife was still dead in the car that they got shot in. He's in the hospital, and they can't get her out of the car because the Russian people or soldiers are shooting at them. So they can't even get people when they know where they are.
Yeah. So it's like they're in this traumatic situation that a whole generation's going.
And a lot of them are like Catholic too. So imagine like knowing your loved one is like rotting basically in your car.
Yeah.
And eventually somebody's going to have to get these people. Like they can't just let them be there. And it's going to be a mess.
Yeah, for a while they weren't even doing these kind of death exchanges. They were just kind of having it rot. But it's very hard to know what people in Russia are actually thinking right now, or what they know. But like you said, there are obviously a lot of people who are complicit with it and are going away. And maybe that's what they were trying to explain in the Milgram study. Now, do you want to get into what just happened in Florida with DeSantis's bill?
Not particularly.
Do you know anything really about it? Like, is it like if a teacher were homosexual, would he be able to say my husband or something like that?
It's so vague. Like the wording of it is so vague. So it's basically that under like first grade or something, or second, I don't know, something like that. Under that grade, you can't talk about gay stuff at all.
So they banned like a cartoon where a character is like parents
it's to be determined by the state. So
Gotcha.
They've made it so like vague that like each state can decide what it means. But it's not just, so it's kids under like elementary school, you can't talk about it at all. And then above that, it has to be like age appropriate. So, I mean, that's also very vague and up for interpretation. So, like what is appropriate for what age? When is it appropriate to learn about different sexualities or different genders?
Now, they have, like, Gallup, I don't know how accurate these are, but they're saying that, like, about 6% of the population is gay, but then they're giving 23%.
I think it depends on what kind of gay you mean. Like, if you're talking about, like, gay men, maybe, like, 6% of guys.
Yeah.
I think it's less for women, and then for, like, open different kinds of sexuality, like bisexuality, like what is it, pansexual,
like the whole Kinsey scale.
So I think there's like a larger percent of people like that, like maybe like 20%, maybe the 23% is that.
Yeah, it looks like there are some people say 10, some people say it's less. NPR was saying that.
And people keep saying that like it's so stupid that conservatives think this. What they're trying to do is not make it easier for those gay people or like people with different like gender identities, but they're also don't want people who are going to end up being like straight or like gender conforming to even experiment, because they could. Like if you see your favorite like Disney star is transgender, maybe you would experiment even if you're going to end up being straight. It is a possibility.
You feel a little bit more comfortable.
I think it's completely possible. That's why so many gay people who are extremely gay try being like straight early on, because it does influence you. Now, eventually people are going to be what they are. I think it's more about experimenting than it is like you're going to be who you are. And like your situations and what you experience is going to dictate that to some degree. But if you're a straight person, you're probably not going to end up gay just because someone talks about it or they teach you about it in sex ed.
You read a book once that the dad was gay. The dad's
But
gay.
nowadays also they're fighting to let kids have hormones early on. So if you're experimenting and you think you're trans and maybe you change your mind later and you did go through hormones, I can see how that could be something to worry about.
Obviously a genetic experience if that were
Exactly.
the case. And that does appear to be the case in some situations, but not all of them.
But at the same time, how many people are going to be hurt by not allowing them to be themselves? How many people are going to die from suicide or whatever because they're not able to even talk about their lifestyle, or they're not even allowed to learn about other people who are like them. Hormones, I think, have a little bit more of a debate, but to allow them to learn about these things, I don't think is bad.
Yeah, you hear, I don't know about everybody, but if you just think about your own family, there's probably going to at least be one or two gay people within it. The idea that you wouldn't be able to give any information, particularly to something that's pretty commonplace.
Exactly,
in
because
America,
somebody could be offended. That's not freedom of speech at all.
A book was put into question because a character's parents were they should two dads. And that was considered the gay propaganda. But it's just if you made a movie that was of any group that's 6 to 10% of the country, that's not their propaganda. It really depends on the messaging of it. So, and that was kind of the big debate. I saw a funny statistic on that, was that there were actually 52% of Democrats who supported the bill in their kind of general Florida voting. So it shows kind of society,
The Christian Democrats.
Yeah, maybe. And I guess you get misinformation about what's actually on it. You hear these stories about that they're teaching. I heard on Fox News, it was Fox News or something like that. I don't but they were saying that 5-year-olds were being taught about lube.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. And you know what? To go on that point, I just visited my grandma who's in her 70s, and she only learns about news through social media, okay? And she watches a little bit of local news. But she was showing me all this. I was listening to her watch videos on Facebook, the craziest stuff. And she thinks that this bill is about, the sex education and not having it be in sex education. I'm sorry, but first grader does not get sex education. I didn't get sex education until puberty.
Yeah, puberty. In 5th grade we had a mild version, and then in 6th grade we had a little bit more.
So they start to teach you about it when you start going through those changes in puberty. So these kids are not even being taught any of this. So just being able to maybe have books with different kinds of family dynamics and stuff like that. That's what people are upset about, because they don't want kids to have an option. They want them
normalized.
They want kids to pick being a straight heterosexual couple
because the only option.
Yeah, they don't want them to know there's other options.
Yeah.
That's just the reality. Just like when they're teaching you about going to college, they didn't make it seem like there's other options. They try to guide you into what they want you to do because that makes them more money in the long run or whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Kind of, and like you said, it's a sad feeling to imagine that somebody would have those feelings and no way to articulate them.
Yep.
And that seems like what you're almost guaranteeing. That if you completely take away that education, if somebody's closed off that you're going to end up at a point where people are going to be developing feelings and really have no clue what that feeling is. Only, maybe what they hear from their parents or religion or something like that. And I wouldn't be surprised if it caused more harm. I hadn't even really considered that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's like, is there innocent people who get locked up? Yes, but do we want to let all the murderers out because we could lock somebody up? Like, that's the kind of, calculation that you have to make with this kind of thing. Plus, like, this is America. We're supposed to be free.
Yeah.
And we're allowed to have hate speech, but if you talk about, like, gender identity, that's crossing the line. Or you talk about how Black people have been held back historically. Well, you know what? I'm sorry that it hurts your feelings, but it's the truth.
Was it Ohio that made the law about transgender swimmers for, like, 4 people?
Probably.
Like, one of the states that signed the legislation, that legislation affected 4 people.
That's the thing, like you're making laws for 4 people.
That's gotta hurt.
How many people are you hurting in the process?
At least 4, and then probably then some. With them related, it's it's not as prevalent. I was pretty surprised when I had heard that number about Ohio, that you actually make a law for 4 people. That's symbolism. I think a lot of times the left or Democrats gets accused of doing things symbolically. The conservatives are just
they're worse
good.
On everything. Everything they say that a Democrat does, they do worse.
And then that, when you're doing a whole law, that's a lot of work for 4 people. Just trying to play a sport.
All right, so I think that's everything you need to know for the week. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.